As I was just saying, I'm building myself a motorcycle and woodworking workshop. The base is ready, the materials are all here, and Dad's on his way to help out. So stick around and see how after today we went from this to this. Right, I'm working on the back wall first because it's simpler and it'll go to the back and we can brace it with the fence there. The uprights all need to be the same length at 1952. And I've cut the ends off the timber first so I can give it an accurate measurement, and then they all need to be the same. I tell you what, the Mitre Saw is invaluable for this job. I've been cutting timber all my life just with a handsaw and a mitre box, and for a moment I thought, yeah, that'll do fine, but the seconds it takes to cut through a piece of 2x4 make this absolutely invaluable. When you're making accurate cuts, you have to consider the kerf, the thickness of the blade. I say, when you're making accurate cuts, you need to consider the thickness of the blade. So just bring the blade down to the cut like this and see which side of the line the blade is on. And I want it on the off-cut side, so that my piece is exactly 1952, not 1952 minus 1.6 millimeters, which is the thickness of this blade. There we go, nice and accurate. And now all the other pieces can be measured up to this instead of with the tape measure. Now here's the reason for the brick layer. If your building is the exact same size as your concrete slab, you can put your timber up to the edge, this is not the timber, and then arrange to have your cladding overlap the base to shed the water. But our building is going to be in the middle of the concrete slab. There's going to be some concrete extending past the building, which means that if your timber frame was just directly on the concrete, rainwater could sit for longer and have more time to soak into the timber, which we don't want. So by putting a brick course, we can then have the timber frame resting on the brick course with a layer of DPC between, which I'll stick on in a minute, and then the cladding, this is not the cladding, can overlap the brick course instead, and no water's going to soak up through the bricks because they're engineering bricks. I unrolled a layer of 150mm damp-proof course and cut it with the Klein electrician's shears, which cut anything. I stuck the DPC down with this Sudol sealant and then began to assemble the frame for the south wall. Just at the ends, I pre-drilled the timber to avoid splitting and used 2 screws instead of 1. Everywhere else I just drove these 100mm screws in with the impact driver, which worked great. The 355mm spacer let me quickly set out the studs at 400mm centres. And after that we lined the wall in OSB and got ready to stand it up. Unfortunately, the camera stopped recording in the heat just as we were about to lift the first wall, but we did it and braced it temporarily while we made up and raised the second wall before screwing them together. Okay, we've been framing these walls with 95 by 45 millimeter timber, or as you Americans would call it, 2x4s, generally spaced 400 millimeter centers. Although there are some weird bits around windows and things. You can do 600 millimeter spacing for a building like this. And it should be fine, but it would only have saved a few pieces of wood, and this is going to be a little bit stronger. It also means that you can line the roof joists up with the full height studs for extra strength. And we're lining the outside of the walls with 11 millimeter OSB, which is not something you do for an ordinary shed, but for a garden like this, building like this, it makes it way stronger. It also means the walls can't rack because they're fixed to the uprights. The square edge of the OSB was also really helpful for pulling the frame into square and making it all nice and plumb. So Dad and I have done 2 walls today, which is great. I thought I was going to keep going and start on the front wall, but it's just too hot and the neighbours are starting to enjoy their gardens a bit less because of me, so I think it's time to stop. I have cut the pieces to start framing the front wall tomorrow. Time for a beer. Cheers, see you tomorrow. Okay, we're back at it again today, and I'm hoping this gazebo is going to help quite a bit with the heat. I am going to cut the pieces for the west wall, I think, and then maybe I can stand it up on my own, or maybe I need help. To make the 1 degree pitch on this roof, the uprights just get shorter as we go along, and they've got measurements that make me think of eras. So, got 1952. Wasn't there obviously, 1962, 1970, by all accounts quite fun and quite a lot of hassle, 1993, that's more my era, 2001, Space Odyssey obviously, and 2012, which is when the world ended and we were all replaced with AIs. Where did this come from? I have absolutely no idea, but I like it. Now for this wall I am going to measure where I want the individual struts because they're not regular, and I want to make sure the door frame here is nice and straight. Right, lifting these walls on my own is trickier, so my plan for this end wall is to make sure that this wall is perfectly level, which it now is, and then lift up the frame, make it square by pulling it diagonally, and put some diagonal braces in to lock it, and then lower it down and put some OSB on. All right, I think I'm going to have to call it there. It's 33 degrees outside, and even the Met Office sent me a text saying, "What are you doing, you idiot? Get back inside." The wall looks good. I think I can actually line it from here. All the posts are level, and I've put a brace on top to keep it square. So I think I'm going to leave that there and line it. Let's try and get a couple hours in early in the morning when it's not too hot. Stay cool. Good morning. I had a nice early start and lined the west wall here without showing you, and now I'm going to try and start framing the most complicated north wall. I'm going to do it with just the full height uprights first, and then lift the frame, install the window framing, and then start to line it. It was so hot last night that I realised that I'd been, desperate for a brief respite from the sun, and then this happened. Okay, that was hard work, but I'm pretty pleased with how that went. I've centered the sole plate left and right on the pad, but the top is slightly racked, so I'm going to screw it at the bottom and then straighten it up. On the inside, the frame is supposed to line up with the inside of the bricks like that. And on the front here, we're getting up to 1 centimetre, but it has to be butted up to the frame. So, I don't know, 1 centimetre tolerance on my first build. I think that's fine. I cut the remaining pieces and started to assemble the framing for the windows. Alright, welcome to Framing 101 with Shep. Make sure you're paying attention. Here is the window opening, where the window will go. And because we are missing 2 studs in the middle, we need something to take the weight of the roof. So, the roof bears down on the top plate here, and the force is transferred through these short studs into something called the header, and the header is really just a double thickness piece of 2x4 turned upright for rigidity, and they're screwed together. And then the header sits on 2 low studs called jack studs, and the jack studs transfer that force all the way down to the sole plate. So the idea is the window is not taking any weight at all. The weight is being transferred through the header and the jack studs. Each jack stud is screwed to a full height stud adjacent to the jack studs, which is called a king stud. And then the window just sits on this piece, which is called the rough sill. Sill as in windowsill. And that sits on 2 low height studs here. Right, let's get this all screwed together, and then we can just line the front wall with OSB. Oh, why don't you step into my workshop? Mind the step. That's going to be going. Wow, look at this. The walls are framed and lined. You can see the size of the space, and I love it. I'm so proud. It took 3.5 days in the end, just because of the extreme heat. I'm sure it would have been faster if it wasn't for 35 degrees Celsius. It's great to see the walls up and think about what I can do with this space, but there's one big thing missing, of course, which is the roof. So join us on the next episode where we start to build the roof.